Something is happening right now in Jerusalem, not in the way news breaks, not with sirens or headlines scrolling across screens. This is different. This is the kind of silence that makes your heart stop before it races again. It began 3 hours ago, just after sunset, when the golden domes of the old city were caught between day and night. The sky above the Temple Mount shifted, not like a storm rolling in, but like something ancient remembering itself. I was standing near the western wall when I saw it. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light. You know how Jerusalem glows at dusk, that honey-colored radiance that seems to rise from the stones themselves. But this was different. This light didn't reflect. It descended. A woman next to me gasped. Her hands trembled as she raised them toward the sky. "I saw this," she whispered. "In a dream, last week, exactly like this." Around us, the plaza began to shift. Shopkeepers stopped mid-sentence. Pilgrims froze with their phones half raised. Even the wind between the domes fell silent, as if the air itself was holding its breath. The light grew stronger, not blinding, but present. It hovered above the mount, neither moving nor fading, like a star that had lowered itself just enough to be seen but not touched. It pulsed gently, rhythmically, like breathing. An old rabbi near the prayer section closed his Torah and looked up. His lips moved silently, and I caught fragments of Hebrew, ancient words I didn't understand but felt in my chest. "Zechariah," someone beside him murmured. "Chapter 8. I will return to Zion and dwell in Jerusalem." The crowd began to gather. Not rushing, not panicking, but drawn. Mothers held their children closer. Tourists stood still, cameras forgotten in their hands. A young man in a kippah knelt on the stones, tears streaming down his face. And then, from somewhere deep within the old city, a sound. Not a trumpet, not a voice. Something older, a resonance that seemed to come from beneath the earth and above the sky at the same time. It lasted only a moment, but in that moment, the entire city felt it. Jerusalem stopped. For a moment, even the birds above the mount circled and vanished. I don't know how long we stood there. Time felt irrelevant. But when the light finally softened, not disappearing, but receding gently like a tide pulling back, the world felt different. A man beside me turned to his wife. "Did you feel that?" She nodded, unable to speak. I looked around at the faces in the plaza, strangers, pilgrims, locals, Jews, Christians, Muslims, people who had come to this city for 1,000 different reasons. And in that moment, we all shared the same expression. We had witnessed something, not with our minds, with something deeper. An older woman in a headscarf approached me. Her eyes were red, but she was smiling. "My grandmother told me this day would come," she said softly. She said, "When the light returns to Zion, the time is close." I wanted to ask her what she meant, but before I could, she placed her hand over her heart and walked away, disappearing into the narrow streets of the old city. The crowd began to disperse slowly, reluctantly, as if leaving would break the spell, but the air still hummed. The stones still felt warm beneath my feet. I stayed. I don't know why, but I couldn't leave, not yet. As the last of the pilgrims filtered out, I noticed something carved into the wall near where I stood. Ancient script, worn by centuries of weather and touch. I ran my fingers over it, and a chill ran through me. It was a prophecy. "There shall be signs in the heavens and on the earth, trembling." I looked up at the sky. The light was gone now, but the stars seemed brighter than they had any right to be, and somewhere in the distance I heard the faint echo of a voice. Or maybe it was just the wind, but I don't think it was. "My friend, can you feel it in your spirit? Because what happened tonight in Jerusalem wasn't random, it wasn't a coincidence, and it wasn't just for those who were standing in that plaza. It was for you too. The prophet spoke of a day when light would return to Zion, when the heavens would open and the earth would tremble with the weight of what's coming. Tonight, that day began. And this is only the first sign. The heat shimmered over the domes. By noon the next day, Jerusalem looked the same as it always did. The markets bustled. The call to prayer echoed from minarets. Pilgrims walked the Via Dolorosa with reverence and exhaustion. Life, as it seemed, had returned to normal, but something lingered. You could see it in the eyes of those who had been there. The way they moved through the city differently, slower, quieter, as if carrying something fragile inside them. Conversations in cafes were hushed. People kept glancing at the sky. I was sitting outside a small shop near Jaffa Gate when I overheard two men talking in rapid Hebrew. One of them kept shaking his head, gesturing toward the mount. The other pulled out his phone and showed him something on the screen. I leaned closer. They confirmed it, the first man said in English, switching languages as if he wanted the words to be heard beyond just the two of them. The astronomers, last night, they confirmed it. My heart skipped. What do you mean? Confirmed, the other asked. The light, it wasn't atmospheric. It wasn't a satellite. It wasn't anything they've seen before. He scrolled through an article on his phone. I caught glimpses of the headline, Unexplained Luminous Phenomenon over Jerusalem. No scientific explanation yet. The second man sat back, his face pale. So it was real. It was real. I stood and approached them, my hands trembling slightly. Excuse me, I said. I was there last night, at the Western Wall. I saw it too. They looked at me, and something passed between us. Recognition, not of faces, but of experience. Then you know, the first man said quietly. You know what this means. I didn't, not fully, but I nodded anyway. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. My grandfather was a scholar. He studied the prophets his entire life. He used to say that when the light returned to Jerusalem, it would be the beginning of the fulfillment. The fulfillment of what? He didn't answer directly. Instead, he quoted, And it shall come to pass afterward, that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, your old men shall dream dreams, your young men shall see visions. Joel, chapter 2. I felt the words settle over me like a weight. They don't want you to see what's really happening, he continued, his eyes darkening. The media will ignore it. The governments will dismiss it. But the truth can't stay hidden forever. The second man glanced around nervously. You think they'll suppress it? They already are. I left them there and walked toward the Mount of Olives. The city stretched out before me, golden and ancient, bathed in the relentless midday sun. But even in the brightness, I could still feel the echo of last night's light. At the top of the hill, I found a small group gathered near an overlook. They were praying, some in Hebrew, some in Arabic, some in languages I didn't recognize, but they were all facing the same direction, toward the Temple Mount. A woman beside me, elderly, with a kind face, noticed me watching. You were there last night, weren't you? I nodded. She smiled. So was I. My whole life, I've waited for this. For what? For him to remember us. Her words hung in the air between us. Isaiah said it. She continued softly. Come, my people, enter your chambers and shut your doors behind you. Hide yourselves for a little while until the fury has passed by. She looked at me with eyes that had seen decades. The fury is coming, child, but so is the light. I wanted to ask her more, but she turned back to her prayers, her lips moving silently. I stood there for a long time, watching the city below, watching the people move through their lives, unaware or unwilling to acknowledge what had happened. But I knew, we all knew, those of us who had been there. Something had shifted, and whether the world was ready or not, it was already in motion. By evening, I returned to the Western Wall. The plaza was fuller than usual. Word had spread quietly, carefully, through whispers and text messages and knowing glances. People were waiting to see if it would happen again. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the city glowed violet, the air grew still. The prayers echoed louder. The crowd pressed closer to the ancient stones. And then, just as the first stars appeared, silence. Absolute, breathtaking silence. We all felt it. The same presence. The same weight. But this time, no light appeared. Instead, a sound. Low, deep, resonant, like the earth itself was humming. A child near me began to cry, not in fear, but in awe. His mother held him close, tears streaming down her own face. An old man raised his hands toward the sky. "Maranatha," he whispered. "Come, Lord Jesus." And in that moment, I understood. This wasn't just a sign, it was an invitation. It began like a whisper from the stones. By the third day, something had changed in Jerusalem. Not visibly, the city still looked the same. The walls still stood as they had for millennia. But there was a hum beneath everything, a vibration you couldn't hear with your ears, but felt in your chest. People were arriving, not tourists, not the usual pilgrims with their guidebooks and cameras. These were different. They came quietly, purposefully, with nothing but backpacks and worn Bibles. Some had travelled from distant countries. Others had simply walked from their homes in the city. They all said the same thing: I was called. I met a man from Ethiopia near the Lion's Gate. His name was Dawit. He told me he'd been working in his fields when he felt it. A pull so strong he dropped his tools and started walking. He didn't tell his family where he was going. He just knew. "I saw the light," he said, his English broken but his eyes clear. "Not here. Not in Jerusalem. In my heart. 3 nights ago. And I knew I had to come." There were others like him. A woman from Argentina who sold everything she owned. A young couple from South Korea who left their jobs without explanation. An elderly man from Russia who hadn't left his village in 40 years. They all described the same thing: a dream, a vision, a voice. And they all came to Jerusalem. By the 4th day, the plaza near the western wall was full from dawn to midnight. Not with chaos, but with stillness. People sat on the stones. They prayed. They waited. The authorities didn't know what to do. There were no protests, no demands, just presence, just watching. I was there when the rabbi came. He was old, ancient even, with a long white beard and eyes that seemed to see through time itself. He walked slowly through the crowd, and people parted for him without being asked. He stopped at the center of the plaza and raised his hands. The crowd fell silent. "The Lord is in his holy temple," he began, his voice carrying across the stones. "Let all the earth keep silence before him." Habakkuk, chapter 2. He lowered his hands and looked around at the gathered faces. "Do you know why you're here?" No one answered, but we all felt the weight of the question. "You're here because the time has come," he continued. "The prophets spoke of this. The apostles spoke of this. And now, in our generation, we are the ones who will see it." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "They will tell you it's coincidence," the rabbi said, his voice growing stronger. "They will tell you it's mass hysteria. They will tell you it's anything but what it is." He paused, letting the words settle. "But you know the truth. You feel it. You've always felt it." A woman near me began to weep. Others nodded, their faces illuminated by the setting sun. "For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord, as the waters cover the sea." The rabbi quoted, his voice trembling now. "This is that day. This is that hour." The sun dipped below the horizon, and the city glowed violet as the prayers echoed. And then, as if in response, the light returned. Not above the Temple Mount this time, but within us. I can't explain it any other way. It wasn't something you saw with your eyes. It was something you felt. A warmth spreading through your chest. A clarity settling into your mind. A peace that didn't make sense given the weight of the moment. People began to sing, not planned, not rehearsed, just spontaneous, joyful, reverent song. Some in Hebrew, some in Arabic, some in languages I'd never heard. And for the first time in its long, fractured history, Jerusalem felt whole. I looked around at the faces surrounding me, strangers who had become family in the span of days. We didn't know each other's names, but we knew each other's hearts. We were witnesses, not just of a light in the sky or a sound in the earth, but of something breaking through, something that had been promised for millennia. The rabbi stood in the center of the plaza, tears streaming down his weathered face. "Write this down," he said to no one and everyone. "Tell your children, tell your children's children, that you were here, that you saw, that you believed." A young woman beside me pulled out her phone and began recording, not for social media, not for validation, but for remembrance. Because what was happening in Jerusalem wasn't just a moment, it was a beginning. As the night deepened and the stars emerged, the crowd remained. Some slept on the stones, others kept vigil, but no one left. We all felt it. The next sign was coming, and we wanted to be ready. I was standing near the western wall when I saw it. Not the light this time, not the sound, but something quieter, something personal. A man approached me, middle-aged, with tired eyes and hands that trembled as he spoke. "I need to tell someone," he said. "I need to say it out loud." I nodded, and he sat down on the stones beside me. "I've been angry for 20 years, he began. "At God, at the world, at myself. My son died when he was 7. Car accident. I was driving." His voice broke, but he continued. "I stopped believing, stopped praying, stopped everything. I told myself that if God was real, he wouldn't have let that happen, that he wouldn't have taken my boy." He looked up at the darkening sky. "But 3 nights ago, I had a dream. My son was standing in a field of light. He was older, the age he would be now if he'd lived. And he smiled at me. He said, 'Dad, it's okay. I'm not lost. I'm just ahead of you.'" Tears streamed down his face. I woke up, and I knew I had to come here. I didn't know why. I just knew. He turned to me, his eyes searching. And tonight, when that light came, when I felt it inside me, it was like my son was here. Like he was telling me it's time to let go, to believe again. I didn't know what to say, so I just sat with him in the silence. Around us, others were sharing their stories too, quietly, humbly, as if the stones themselves were listening. A woman spoke of how she'd been healed of a disease the doctors said was terminal. A young man confessed he'd been on the edge of ending his life, but something stopped him. Something called him here instead. An elderly couple held hands and wept, saying they'd prayed for 50 years to see this day. Testimonies rose like incense into the night air. We were a city of broken people being made whole, not by miracles we could measure, but by a presence we couldn't deny. A woman in a hijab approached the group and asked if she could speak. Her voice was soft but steady. "I am Muslim," she said, "but I have always believed that God is one, that he speaks to all who listen. And 3 nights ago, I heard him." She paused, gathering her courage. "He told me to come here, to stand with my brothers and sisters, all of them, no matter their faith, because what is coming is bigger than any one of us." She looked around at the faces watching her. "I don't know what will happen, but I know that we are meant to be here, together." The crowd was silent for a moment. Then an old rabbi stepped forward. He extended his hand to her. "Salam," he said. She took his hand, tears in her eyes. "Shalom." And in that moment, something shifted again. Not in the sky, not in the earth, but in us. The walls we'd built between each other, the walls of religion, of politics, of fear, began to crumble, because we all felt the same thing. We were being called to something greater than ourselves. By midnight, the plaza was full of people sitting in circles, sharing their stories. Strangers were praying together. Hands were held. Tears were shed. And somewhere in the midst of it all, I felt a voice, not audible but undeniable, speaking to my heart. Tell them what you've seen. Tell them it's real. Tell them I am coming. I don't know why I felt compelled to share this. I'm not a prophet. I'm not a preacher. I'm just someone who was here, who witnessed, who believed. But maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all any of us can do. As the night wore on and the city settled into a sacred stillness, I looked around at the faces illuminated by candlelight and starlight. We didn't know what tomorrow would bring. We didn't know if the light would come again. We didn't know if the world would believe us. But we knew this. We had been changed, and nothing would ever be the same. The golden light brushed the ancient stones. Morning came softly on the 5th day, as if the city itself was waking from a dream. But it wasn't a dream. We all knew that now. I walked through the streets of the old city as the sun rose, casting long shadows across the cobblestones. The air was cool, crisp, filled with the scent of fresh bread and frankincense. Everything looked the same, but everything felt different. Shopkeepers opened their doors with quiet reverence. Pilgrims walked the paths with softer steps. Even the children playing in the alleys seemed more thoughtful, more aware. I returned to the Western Wall one last time before I was scheduled to leave Jerusalem. I didn't want to go. Part of me felt like leaving would mean missing something, like the story wasn't finished yet. But another part of me understood. The story wasn't meant to stay in Jerusalem. It was meant to be carried out into the world. As I stood before the ancient stones, I noticed a young girl, no more than 10, placing a small piece of paper into a crack in the wall. The tradition, a prayer written down and offered to God. She stepped back and saw me watching. She smiled. "What did you pray for?" I asked gently. She looked up at the wall, then back at me. "I prayed that everyone would see what we saw, that they would believe." Her mother came and took her hand, nodding at me with knowing eyes. "Out of the mouth of babes," she said softly, quoting the Psalms. I watched them walk away, and something settled in my chest. A peace. A clarity. This little girl understood what many adults couldn't grasp. This wasn't about proving anything. It wasn't about convincing skeptics or defending the unexplainable. It was about witnessing, and then sharing. I spent the rest of the morning walking through the city, saying goodbye to the people I'd met. Dawit from Ethiopia, the woman from Argentina, the couple from South Korea, the man who'd lost his son. We exchanged no contact information, no promises to stay in touch, because we all knew we were connected now by something deeper than friendship. We were connected by what we'd seen, by what we'd felt, by what we'd been changed into. As I prepared to leave, I stopped one last time at the Mount of Olives. The city stretched out below me, bathed in afternoon light. From here, you could see it all: the dome of the rock, the Western Wall, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, sacred ground, contested ground, holy ground, and for 5 days it had been ground where heaven touched earth. I closed my eyes and let the sun warm my face. "What now?" I whispered to the wind, and in my heart I heard the answer: "Go, tell them, don't let them forget." I opened my eyes and looked out over Jerusalem one last time. The prophets had spoken of this city for millennia. They said it would be a light to the nations, a place where God's presence would dwell, a sign of things to come. And for 5 days we had seen it, not in the way we expected, not with armies or angels descending from the clouds, but with light, with sound, with presence, with transformation. And it was enough. It was more than enough. As I walked down the hill and back toward the city gates, I thought about what would happen next. Would the light appear again? Would the signs continue? Would the world finally pay attention? I didn't know. But I knew this. Something had been set in motion, something that couldn't be stopped or silenced or explained away. The prophets had spoken, the witnesses had seen, and the promise remained. "And it shall come to pass in the last days, says God, that I will pour out of my spirit on all flesh, I whispered, quoting the book of Acts. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, your young men shall see visions, your old men shall dream dreams. This was that day, and we were the ones chosen to see it. The city glowed violet as the prayers echoed. I didn't leave Jerusalem that day. I couldn't, because as I stood at the city gates with my bag in hand, ready to return to my ordinary life, something stopped me. A pull, a whisper, a knowing. This story wasn't over, and I wasn't meant to leave yet. I turned back toward the old city and walked through the narrow streets as twilight fell. The lamps reflected on wet cobblestones from a brief afternoon rain, and the air smelled of earth and stone and something indefinable, something sacred. I found myself back at the western wall just as night descended. The plaza was quieter now. Most of the crowd had dispersed, but a small group remained, sitting on the stones in silence. I joined them. We sat together for hours, not speaking, just being present, waiting. For what? I wasn't entirely sure, but we all felt it. There was one more thing, one more sign, one more moment we were meant to witness. As midnight approached, a man stood. He was young, maybe 30, with a weathered face and eyes that seemed to carry the weight of the world. I need to say something, he announced to the small group. We turned to him. I'm a scientist, he began, an astronomer. I study the stars, the cosmos, the measurable universe. And I came here 5 days ago because I saw something on my instruments, something I couldn't explain. He paused, his voice trembling. The light that appeared above this city, it registered on equipment from 3 different observatories. We tried to explain it. We ran every test, every analysis, and we found nothing. No atmospheric phenomenon, no satellite reflection, no natural explanation. He looked around at us. It shouldn't exist, but it did. And it does. An elderly woman in the group stood. So what are you saying? The astronomer's eyes filled with tears. I'm saying that for the first time in my life, I can't rely on science to give me answers. I'm saying that what happened here defies everything I've spent my career studying. And I'm saying, I believe. The word hung in the air like a benediction. I believe, he repeated, this time stronger. And I'm not going back to my old life. I don't know what comes next, but I can't pretend this didn't happen. I can't go back to a world where this doesn't matter. One by one, others in the group stood. I believe, said a woman who'd traveled from Japan. I believe, said a man who'd walked from Egypt. I believe, said a teenager who'd come with nothing but a backpack and a dream. And then I stood. I believe. The words felt like an earthquake in my chest, an unlocking, a surrender. Because belief isn't just intellectual. It's not just agreeing with an idea or accepting a possibility. Belief is choosing to stake your life on something you can't fully understand. And in that moment, we all made that choice. As we stood together in the darkness, the wind began to stir, gently at first, then stronger. It moved through the plaza like a living thing, carrying with it the scent of rain and stone and something else, something eternal. And then, for the last time, we felt it. Not the light, not the sound, but the presence. It settled over us like a blanket, like a hand on the shoulder, like a voice saying, "Well done. You saw, you believed, now go and tell them." I don't know how long we stood there. Time, once again, felt irrelevant. But when the wind finally stilled and the night grew quiet, we all knew it was time to leave. Not because the story was over, but because it was time for the story to spread. We embraced each other, this small group of believers who'd been strangers a week ago. We didn't exchange names or numbers. We didn't need to. We had been changed by the same thing. We carried the same testimony, and that was enough. As I finally walked away from the western wall, I looked back one last time. The stones glowed softly in the moonlight. The city rose up around them, ancient and enduring. And I understood. Jerusalem wasn't just a place. It was a promise that God remembers his people, that he keeps his word, that what he has spoken through the prophets will come to pass. "Behold, I am coming soon," I whispered, quoting the book of Revelation. "My reward is with me, to give to each person according to what they have done." Maranatha. Come, Lord Jesus. I left Jerusalem the next morning, but I didn't leave alone. I carried with me the testimony of what I'd seen, the light, the sound, the transformation, and I carried with me a calling to tell this story, to share it with anyone who would listen, to be a witness to what happened in that sacred city over 6 unforgettable days. Maybe you're reading this and you're skeptical. Maybe you think it's impossible. Maybe you need proof. I understand. I would have felt the same way a week ago. But my friend, I'm telling you, something is stirring. Something ancient and eternal is waking up. The signs are here. The prophecies are being fulfilled. You don't have to believe me. But I pray that you'll ask yourself, what if it's true? What if the light over Jerusalem was real? What if the prophets were right? What if the time we've been waiting for, the time they've been warning us about, is now? Because if it is, then everything changes. And the question isn't whether you believe. The question is, will you be ready?